Well, good morning, River City Church. You guys doing okay today? I know that's awkward when somebody asks you questions and know how to respond to it, but it's a good day to be doing anything. It's beautiful outside. We're so glad that you guys are here with us today. And if you're a guest, my name is David Tillman. I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and we've been walking through a series. This is week 6, actually, of a series entitled Beloved. We've been walking through this book of 1 John in the New Testament. And what's kind of fitting today is that the theme that we're going to get to today in this letter is love. And then we're also celebrating something else today, in case you guys haven't forgotten. One of the first places where we really experience love in life, and that is from mom. So happy Mother's Day to all the moms in the room. This would be the appropriate time, guys, if you want to clap for that. Not to be manipulative, but it is appropriate right there. So, moms, thank you so much. And I wanted to show a video here right in the beginning just to show how we first experienced love from mom. This is what I'm talking about right here. It's 21 seconds. Enjoy. Isn't that not adorable? Come on. So I wanted to show you a video that kind of shows this, but I also wanted to tell you a story on the backside of this of how we experience love from mom and the difference that it can make in the world. And the story is about a lady named Pam. Now, in the summer of 1986, Pam and her husband Bob were missionaries on a remote island in the Philippines. And that summer, as they were sharing the gospel on this island, they became kind of overwhelmed that there were so many people that have never heard about the love of God. And they were among these people all the time, and there was just too many. And they had 4 kids at the time, but even at that, there were not enough people to teach and tell these people about the love of God. So they started to pray. They said, God, we need more people to come and tell about your love. And as they did, they started to sense that they were, in a way, supposed to be part of the answer to their own prayer, and that is that God was leading them to have another child. So the things that were difficult about this for Pam is that she was almost past childbearing years, and on top of that, she was considered high risk at the time. And on top of that, the place that they lived in the Philippines, the access to health care that they had was only the most rudimentary. If you had a serious problem, you were kind of on your own in the place where they lived. So there were a lot of headwinds. As they prayed about it some more, they really started to sense, no, this is something that God is leading us to do. So they pressed forward anyway and made plans to have a child, if that's what God wanted to do through them. We'll fast forward a few months, and she becomes pregnant with a child, and it's a boy. And they've been praying for this boy by name. Now, she was concerned, and she told in an interview later that there was not a day during the 9 months of her pregnancy when she was not concerned about one of 2 things happening. She was concerned that she might lose her child because of all the medical complications, and then she was also concerned on the other side of it that maybe she would lose her own life in the process. And so she continued to pray. She said there were so many times that she felt like she had lost her child, only to wake up the next morning and realize that she was still pregnant. And then fast forward to August of 1987, and she gives birth to a child, a healthy baby boy, that they named Timmy. And the reason that they named him Timmy is because when they were praying for him, they were reading through a book that the Apostle Paul wrote to a young pastor in the New Testament named Timothy. And so when Timmy was born, this is what he looked like. This is a picture of the family right here. Sorry that the picture's so grainy. This is the best we could do in 1987. But that's Timmy right there in the front. This little malnourished kid that was kind of scrawny. Don't feel bad for him, though, because he more than recovered. This little baby that was born into the world and weighed just a few pounds grew up to be a pretty healthy young man. In fact, a really athletic young man. This kid, Timmy, is somebody that you probably know by the name of Tim Tebow. And this is a picture of what Timmy kind of became. So you can see he filled out a little bit there. And because of his athletic prowess and because of just the fact that he was a physical specimen, he came to be known as one of the best college football players of all time. Now, that was who he was, but if you put the picture back up there for just 1 second, you can also see something else that he became, that in his eye black down there, there are trademark Bible verses. He used to put a different Bible verse every game. So he also became a preacher of the gospel, which is one of those interesting little things that God does. You think you're praying for one thing and then he gives you something different. And his dad said, we thought we were praying for a preacher, we got a quarterback. But you also got a preacher, because then later on in life, even right now, post-football, he preaches the gospel. Well, because of his success at Florida, in 2010, he was asked to be part of a commercial during the Super Bowl with his mom. And his mom basically just told the story of how he came into the world and her love for her son. And this is a picture of them at the time, just to bring it full circle. There's Timmy and Pam right there during that commercial. Now, on the other side of this commercial, she did an interview. And she was asked during the interview, why did you go through with this? And with all of the headwinds that were facing you, like, why would you put yourself in this situation? I mean, this seems like a really dangerous place to be. And she said this. She said, well, first of all, I'm a believer in Jesus, and we just really felt like that this is something that God wanted us to do. So there was that. That was the first thing of why we did. But then also, I had to make a calculation as a mom at the beginning. She said, I just decided that if God wanted us to have a child, then even if I had to give my life in the process, it would be worth it in order for my son to come into the world. That was something that I was willing to do. And so I just made that calculation. Now, that's pretty stunning, isn't it? But as I thought about that this week, I thought about the fact that as inspiring as that love from Pam was toward her son, it's not that unique, really. When I look at my mom, when I look at my wife, who's mom to our kids, and when I look at a lot of moms in the room, I see that same love reflected in you. Because in mom, what we see, first of all, is we see a picture of what love should be. That's how we experience it. This is the way that it should be. Somebody that is willing to just give and give and give so that their child will be loved and protected no matter what. That's the picture that we see of what should be. And then on the other side of it, what that gives us is that gives us a vision and a hope for the future, that in all of our relationships that we experience, that is what could be. So we experience what should be, and then looking to the future, we say, I know it could be because I saw it back there in my relationship with my mom. But I don't have to tell you that that's not the way that it always is. The way that it could be is not always the way that it is. And a lot of the reason why is what Jonathan spoke to last week. In our study of this letter last week, Jonathan pointed out where when we're born into the world, we're born into a world at war. That there's literally a war going on between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of Satan. And these things are butting heads with each other. You've got light and darkness. You've got literal love and hate. And in the fog of this battle, the one thing that Satan wants to do more than anything else is to deceive you, to confuse you and to confuse me as to the actual nature of what love is. And to get us so turned upside down that we don't even know what it is. And the stakes are so high that when we go through this letter of 1 John, we see that John uses very stark language. Stark language to point out to us that this is what truth is, and this is what a lie is. This is what love looks like, and this is what it doesn't look like. And we're going to see that this morning as John jumps into this situation, and he just goes straight to the heart of the lies. Maybe lies that you've heard, maybe lies that, like me, that you've believed about love. And then he confronts those with the truth. And let's take a look at that in 1 John chapter 3. We're going to start in verse 11. Verse 11 through 15. This is what John says. For this is the message you have heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Unlike Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. We know that we passed from death to life because we love our brothers and sisters. The one who does not love remains in death. Everyone who hates his brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. So the two lies in that passage that John wants to jump in and go straight to, The first one that he points out is this. See if you've heard or believed this before. The lie goes like this. It is possible to love God and not to love your brothers and sisters in the family of God. And to that, John would say, no, that's not the way that it works. He says that we know that, in fact, that we've passed from death to life if we love those who are in the family of God, our brothers and sisters. And he says it in such stark language. If you don't have love, then you don't have life. And this is not something that John has made up. He heard this straight from Jesus. If you haven't been with us, you know, this Apostle John was one that was on the inner circle with Jesus for all of the 3 years of his public ministry on earth. He was front and center, heard everything that Jesus said and saw him do. And one day, in Mark 13, we have this recounting of something that John heard firsthand. And there's a teacher of the law that comes up to Jesus, and he says, "Teacher, what is the most important command in the law?" Now, there were 613 commands in the Jewish law that the teachers taught that you had to follow, and you had to follow those perfectly to be right with God. And so this guy says to him, well, what's the most important one of the 613? And Jesus responds to him with something out of what's called the Shema. It was something that every Hebrew boy and girl would have memorized and they would say every day. He said, well, the most important commandment is this, that you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So he said, that's one. And he said, and the second one is like it. You should love your neighbor as yourself. So he reaches over into another part of the law and pulls that out. And then he says a pretty shocking thing. He says that in those two, the entire law and all of the prophets is summed up in that. Everything. He says, if you want to know what sums it all up, you love God and then love your neighbor the way that you've been loved by God. That sums up everything. And this became the theme of John's life. When you read through John's gospel, I think it's pretty interesting that you'll know that he's referring to himself when he says the one that Jesus loved. He didn't say me, he didn't say John, he said the one that Jesus loved. That's what he called himself. Because he onboarded this, he experienced this, and he took it to heart. I'm the one that Jesus loved, is what he called himself. There's an interesting story. A 4th century theologian, Jerome, recounts in one of his writings of a story that was passed down to him about John in his later years. He says that when John was in his late 90s, he lived out the end of his life in a city called Ephesus, one of the cities that this letter was written to, the church in that city. And he said that John was so old and infirm in those days that he had to be carried to church to get up and teach in front of the people there. So they would carry him and they would set him in front of the church. And Jerome says that week after week, this is what he would say. He couldn't say many words because he didn't have the strength. And so he would summon his strength and he would say this, little children, love one another. And week after week, he would just come and he would say that. Now at first, I'm sure they thought it was great, but after a while, they kind of got annoyed. Because he was just saying the same thing week after week. It's like, we've heard this message every week. And so somebody finally got up the courage to say to him, you know, could you tell us something else? Why do you say this every single week? And John's response to him was, well, that was the command that I heard straight from Jesus. And if you do that, then it will be enough. And so John's saying, look, what I heard him say is that if you can do that, then that's enough. And that's the only theme of my life. You have to have it. The second lie that John points to here is that if you live a life of loving God, that you'll be loved for it. And it makes sense, doesn't it? The lie makes sense. If you live this life of loving God and loving other people, why would anybody have any reason not to like you? But John says, let's go back to the beginning. The very first family, we've got Cain and Abel. And if you guys don't remember the story of Cain and Abel, Abel was the one who they had received this love from God. And God said, hey, if you want to show me love in response, you can offer an offering. And here's what that offering looks like. And Abel offered that offering. Well, Cain wanted to do his own thing. And so he just offered whatever he wanted. And God said, well, that's not what I asked for. So I don't want that offering. Well, he was so mad that he killed his brother. And this is what John points back to. He says, when you do the right thing and you respond to me, there's going to be people that will not like it. So don't be surprised, he says, when people hate you because of it. In fact, if you want to fast forward a little bit, a very famous example is, of course, Jesus. He came, the most loving person that ever lived, and was killed for it. And that's what John points to in verse 16 and following. He says, this is how we have come to know love. He laid down his life for us. We should also lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has this world's goods and sees a fellow believer in need, but withholds compassion from him, how does God's love reside in him? Little children, let us not love in word or speech, but in action and truth. So there's two lies here, again, that John is combating. The first lie goes like this, that love can be defined many different ways. Or maybe even more specifically, love can be defined any way that you want to define it. But I love what John does here is he says, this is how we've come to know love. And he doesn't say it's this, he says he. So he's saying we came to know love and it's a person. We came to know Jesus. And by coming to know Jesus, we saw that what love did is came and laid his life down for us. So what is love? Well, I think John would say, well, if you want to know what love is, don't Google it. You'll get one answer. If you ask a pundit on TV, you'll get a different answer. If you ask a politician, you'll get 15 different answers. Right? If you ask your buddy on the golf course, you'll get another different answer. But he's saying if you want to know what love is, you have to look at Jesus because he is love. And he's the way that we came to know love. And he laid his life down for us. John was front and center for all of this. He saw love in action. And here's something that John saw. When Jesus gathered his disciples together for what came to be known as the Last Supper, he gathered them together knowing what he was about to face. And seated right next to him was John. It said that he reclined against him. So he was so close that he could reach out and touch him. So he saw and heard everything that was going on at the Last Supper. Jesus, knowing that he was going to the cross, knowing that one of his friends seated around the table was about to betray him to death, knowing the unbelievable suffering that he was about to undergo, knowing all of that going forward, he stood up and did something that they could never, ever have imagined was about to happen. He got up, he took a towel, and he wrapped it around himself. And then he went around to each person sitting at the table, and he performed something that only the lowest of servant would ever do. He took off their sandals, and he began to wash their feet. They're nasty, disgusting, smelly, sandal-wearing. Are you getting the picture yet? Let's not romanticize this. This was gross work. But he went around and he did this for each person around the table. And he got to Peter. Peter tried to stop him. That didn't end well. He said, no, I'm going to do this. And he gets done and he comes and he sits down and he says to them, he says, look, I'm going to leave. I'm going to be gone. You guys don't understand this, but I'm not going to be able to do things like this for you physically anymore. I can't do it anymore. And then he said this to them, John 13, 34, 35. This is what John heard. Jesus said, I give you a new command. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you just experienced it. Go love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And then not long after, Jesus would give us the ultimate example of what love looks like when he would go to the cross. And on the cross, as John's standing at the foot of the cross with Jesus' mother, John would hear him say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So John knew a little bit about what love really was. And the second lie that he comes against here is this lie that love can just be something that you say and something that you don't actually do. Love doesn't just say, hey, I love you. Or the southern version of that would be, man, bless your heart, guys. Bless your heart. Love you guys so much. Hey, I have something that I need. Hey, man, gotta go. And we know this, don't we? We know this automatically, because if I were to stand up here and I were to say, hey, I love my family so much. Man, love my family. I'll just go on and on about how much I love my family. And then you were to say, well, where's your family right now? Oh, well, they're, I don't know, they're super hungry and they have a lot of needs. And they're homeless out there, but I took the last of our money and I came up here to, Dave & Buster's to play some video games. And I'm having a good time though, but I love my family. You would say, you don't love your family at all. You are, what would we say? We would say you are all talk, because we instinctively know that love that just talks and doesn't actually do is not real love. And that's what John is saying. He said, what I saw when I was around Jesus, if there was a need, if somebody needed compassion, he gave compassion. If there was somebody that needed food, I saw him provide that. And if there was somebody that needed saving, and I did, then I saw him and the lengths that he was willing to go to do that. John is saying, I know what love is, and that's what it is. And what's interesting is if you like words, and I like words, so for the two of us in the room that care about that, let me give you a cool little insight. The word that the New Testament writers used for the love of God, in the English language, we have difficulty with this, don't we? You can say, like maybe later today you will say, Mom, I love you, right? And then later on, you might be eating lunch or something, you say, man, I love pizza. Now, we know instinctively that those are two different things, but we only have one word to say it. So we say it. Now, in Greek, though, they had a lot of words. There were 6, 7, something like that, words for different types of love. Now, the one that the writers of the New Testament chose for the love of God is the word agape. And what's interesting is that they didn't choose the word agape because they looked at the Greek language and go, oh, cool, they have this word over here that means the love of God. That wasn't how it worked. They had all these words for love, and what they did is looking at Jesus, looking at how they experienced the love of God, looking what that felt like and how it was expressed to them, they chose this word agape. And the reason that they did is this is what agape means. It means a giving, sacrificial love that doesn't expect anything in return. It's an act of the will and not a feeling. It's a commitment to give out of the supply that a person has. That's what agape was. And now over time, that word came to be synonymous with the love of God, because that's the way that they referenced it, and that's the word that they used. Now, I want to recap, and then I want us to go down one other road before we're done. Here's what we've seen so far, that love is the one great essential thing. That if we love God, that we will love the family of God. Just like Jesus said, that sums up everything. It's like two sides of a coin. You can't have one without the other thing. That when you love God, you'll love your brothers and sisters in your family. The second thing we saw is that you will face opposition when you choose to love as he loves. And then we saw that we know what love is by coming to know the one who is love. We look to Jesus and see the definition of love. And then the last thing we saw here is that love is active. Love is active. And the best picture of that is the cross, the lengths that Jesus was to go to. Now, at this point in the message, here's the problem that I have, is that knowing all of this, it would be really easy for us to feel super guilty and for us to manipulate each other with this. Because we could say something like, well, look at all that God has done for you. Now, what are you doing for him? All right? And you would feel bad. I would feel bad. Hey, God's done all of these things for you. Now you need to go and love him in the same way. I mean, what would Jesus do? But the problem is that I've been doing this a little while, and I can just tell you that I can't do that. Now, I can probably do that with my close friends and my family and all this, like people that you have shared history with, and you can picture that. Mom and son, you're like, no, I can do that. But Jesus says, okay, I want you to love one another, your brothers and sisters in the family. Now you think about the family of God here in this church, but then across the globe. There's a lot of people in the family of God that love God and that are your brothers and sisters. Now I'll just speak for me. There are people that get on my nerves. Right? Well, does anybody want to admit that there's people that get on there? It is hard to love some people. Why is that? I mean, I might be one of those people for you that's hard to love. If it's somebody that comes from a different background than you, if it's someone that just has a different way of relating to people than you do, then it's really difficult to love that person, isn't it? If it's somebody that's wronged you, well, I mean, how am I going to deal with that? It's frustrating. Every time I'm around this person, they offend me. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't do that in me. You could tell me all the day, you really need to love them, and I could act like I'm loving them. I could fake it, right? There's two really bad options here. You could say, well, Dave, I just really want to be authentic. And so when somebody annoys me, I'm just going to unload both barrels on them, and I'm just going to smoke them because I don't want to be inauthentic, so I'm just going to blast everyone that I disagree with. Well, that's really bad, right? And that'll get you fired as well. But then on the other side, there's another bad option that we have, is that we could just fake it. We could make it, you guys, and this, I mean, sometimes you just have to smile, right? And just say, okay, I'm just going to choose to overlook this. And you could just fake it and act loving towards people. But you know the difference in faking it and actually having love from the heart. You can fake it, but the love from the heart thing, I can't do that. There's not enough emotion. There's not enough inertia here in the room today that we could go out today and just love people that annoy us or that are different than us or whatever with the love of Jesus. It might last until you get to the parking lot, and then they'll cut you off and you'll be like, all right, that's it. So how do we do it? Well, this is the good news. You guys are uncomfortable right now, aren't you? This is the good news, is that you don't have to, and you were never meant to. Because there's one other lie that John is going to blow out of the water, and it is this, that you can love others if you try really, really hard to do so. You can love other people in your own strength if you just try harder and do more. It doesn't work. And I'm going to show you why. And this is a huge relief. I hope it is for you. This is very, very good news for me. 1 John 4, 7 through 13, which John says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, because love is from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, because God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent us his one and only Son into the world so that we might live through him. Love consists in this, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins." Dear friends, if God loved us in this way, we also must love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God remains in us, and his love is made complete in us. This is how we know that we remain in him and he in us. He has given us of his Spirit. So the good news is this, that love has a source. And it's not you. And it's not me. But there's a place that you can go where there is an inexhaustible supply of love, and it is God. John is saying that love is of God. And what is love? He says, this is love. Not that we loved God. So let's back up from this. Love God and love other people. You can't do either of them. That's what John's saying. In your own ability, you can't do either of them. He says, love is not that we loved God, but that he loved us first. So our love for God is a response to his love for us. He says, I love you. I'm coming down. I'm going to give towards you. It doesn't matter if you respond or not. I'm here and I'm going to the cross and I'm going to give my life. And it doesn't matter. I'm going to pour myself out for you because I want you to know that you are loved. And if you come to me, you'll have forgiveness and you will receive the love of a father. And so he pours out his love on us. And then us loving God is simply saying, I can't believe that's true. I receive that. Thank you, God. I'm in awe of that. And that's what we call loving God. It's literally just responding to his love. And then, amazed by his love and filled up and in awe of his love, we say, God, how can I do anything to repay you? And he says, well, look around you at all the other people, your brothers and sisters that are also looking at me and saying, God, I can't believe this is true. You are too good to be true. You've been so good to me. Well, turn around and love them just like I've loved you. If you do that, no one in the world has ever seen God, John says, but if you do that, they'll see him through you. I love this quote by C.S. Lewis in his book, The Four Loves. He describes the love of God, and he says this, in God, there is no hunger that needs to be filled, only plenteousness. How many times have you used that word this week? Only plenteousness that desires to give. What Lewis is saying is there is a place where there is an inexhaustible supply. And guess what? There's no reluctance on the part of God to pour out his love on you. All you have to do is go and look to Jesus. Allow him to love you. Well, how do you do that? Well, Jesus said, if you love me, you'll do what I command. How does that all work together? Well, when you love Jesus, you say, hey, I love you. I believe that what you say is true. So I believe that your commands are for my good. And I want to live in your love. So I'm going to do what you say. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow you. And when we come to him, he fills us up with his love, that awe and that wonder. And he enables us to have something to give. There was a time when I did something dumb as a dad, and we were going to run some errands as a family. And we got in the car, and we were going to go run 2 or 3 errands pretty close to our house. And I looked down when I started the car, and the gas light was on. And when the gas light comes on, we all know that means you got plenty of time. So we went and ran a few errands, and then we went to the grocery store, got all of our groceries. We went out there. It's kind of hot that day. Get all the groceries in the car. Start to drive out of the grocery parking lot. The car died. And I thought, well, this is not a big deal. I'll just restart it. But that wasn't happening. So everybody in the car looked at me like, what'd you do? And I had to tell them, like, I ignored the light. The car was empty. I just ignored it. So I had to walk to AutoZone, had to buy the tank, had to walk down to the Exxon, had to get some gas, had to walk back, and they're all dying. And, it's something we laugh about now, but it wasn't funny at all. So the reason I tell you that is this. When you sense in you as a child of God, you come up against somebody and like, wow, this person annoys me. I can't love them. I'm supposed to love them. That is a blinking light on the dash. When that happens in me, that is a light on the dash that says, Dave, tank is almost empty. What am I supposed to do? Well, I'm just supposed to try harder to drive the car to the grocery store and everything will be fine. No, because you are going to hit the point where there is no gas. You have not the supply, but there's a place where you can go and you can find the supply. Well, that is what he's saying. When that happens and when you feel that lack of love, that is to remind you that there is a place where grace is poured out and it is free. It is inexhaustible. It is plenteousness in your life. And if you will come to me, you can receive. And then when we are in his presence and we are amazed and we are filled back up with his love, we say, okay, now I can go and I can respond in the way that you've responded to me. And guys, I wish I could give you principles on, well, this is what you have to do, and you have to have a quiet time like this, or you have to pray, or you generally, well, none of that stuff will work if it doesn't lead you into the presence of a loving God where you are amazed by his goodness. we're going to do something now that we do every single week. And it's one of the ways that if we're thoughtful about the way that we do it, that can lead us to the presence of God. Jesus, at that same Last Supper that we talked about, he said, hey, when you get together, remember the bread and remember the cup that we're about to share together, because it's supposed to be a reminder of you of how I came to pour out my love for you. I came to show you what it should be, how it should be, and then I came to give you vision for what it could be in your life, in your family, in your church, in your world.